Peace, peace, peace. Welcome to another episode of Wise the Dome TV. Today, I have another very special guest. Man, this brother is a dynamic educator, founder of All That Math. Um, just somebody who is, I didn't even know there was such a thing, but until I met this brother, which I would say he's somewhat of a mathematics influencer, right? Which is an amazing thing in and of itself because he's helping not only the youth but adults understand the importance of math, how to teach math, and how to use math in our everyday lives. And so you've seen him on I Never Knew TV. You've seen him on Kofi Pichet TV and a lot of other and on his own channel as well. And I'm sorry, it was all this math, and but I do apologize for that. But yeah, Akil Parker, thank you for coming through, brother.
Hey man, thanks for extending to me the opportunity and the invitation,
Absolutely.
to pull up, man.
No, absolutely, absolutely. So before we even get started, can you talk to the people about what all this math is?
So all this math is essentially it's a movement to improve the relationship between mathematics and the black community,
Hmm.
globally, and have us start to embrace mathematics as a tool of liberation and something to run towards as opposed to what many of us have done through our, educational experiences, something that we run away from,
Hmm.
right? So we create resources. We have online resources such as my YouTube channel, the All
Hmm.
This Math YouTube channel, where we have like content ranging from arithmetic all the way up to calculus one, where there's like Black history, interspersed within the videos, and then there's like my book that I published back in 2023, How to Use All This Math, Volume One, which is really is what it looks like on the cover,
Hmm.
which is really it's a resource guide, where I'm saying like I'm immersed in math, so I see mathematical equations and
Hmm.
applications all around me constantly because I do that work. But if you don't do that, you might not recognize certain things. So what I decided to do some years ago was, what if I wrote a book where I show people like, okay, this everyday activity that you're already doing with your children, like making some dinner, your kids grabbing a snack out the kitchen, pouring some juice when you're riding in the car, the different things that you gotta, you see on your dashboard on the car.
Hmm.
What if I just said, okay, how to show people how to make that into a math lesson,
Hmm.
right? An arithmetic lesson, a geometry lesson, a simple algebra lesson,
Hmm.
right? Because then what happens is your children are then practicing math in a safe space, with loved ones, with you as the parent, the grandparent, the uncle, the auntie, the big cousin, whoever. And then when they go into the school, if they go into a school, public school, charter school, even a private school, they don't have the chance to become intimidated by math because almost everything that the teacher puts up on the board, like, okay, class, we're going to cover this topic today or this standard. Oh, and when you'll recognize, you're like, oh, okay, I do this with my mom, I do this with my pop, I do this with my dad. Oh, we doing unit conversions? Okay, cool. Like, nah, because we do that all the time, and you're practicing your math skills on a regular basis as well. So therefore, you build up your confidence. Just like a lot of our children are confident in playing Madden, they're confident in playing 2K, Fortnite, all the video games because they practice on a consistent basis. But oftentimes we don't practice the math because there's a lot of propaganda, not a negative propaganda around mathematics that it's too difficult for us.
Hmm.
It's not something that black people do.
Hmm.
We don't need it. You're never gonna use that in everyday life.
Yeah, I hear
And
you hear that a lot.
yeah, like, and
Hmm.
it's like, it reminds me of Kwame Ture, like, the American capitalist system will not only make you ignorant, but then it makes you arrogant in your ignorance.
Mm.
So it's like, oh, you don't understand the math, probably through no fault of your own in many cases,
Hmm.
based on your educational experience. But then as like a defense mechanism, you kind of develop this attitude where like, man, I don't need that shit anyway. You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying?
yeah.
Part of my language. Am I
No,
allowed to
you're
curse?
good. Absolutely. No, no,
Okay,
we
cool.
good. We good. Yeah, yeah. No, we good. We good. No,
Yeah.
and so with so nah, that's real. As far as even like framing math, right? Like and how we approach it. Um, students they may have their favorite class may be history or or writing class because they like to write. But why is math always framed as all right, it's not framed as something that it's that that children will, or even adults, um, will see as, hey, this is another class, another skill that I'm learning. It's always like it's always has these negative connotations where, hey, we have to, I just got to get through this class, not excel in it, right? I just got to get through this class. Um, um, the framing of how we approach math compared to the other classes that we take is always different, as math is something, hey, we just have to get by, where everything else is, it's encouraged to have fun and learn, and how it applies to your everyday life. And like you just mentioned, we even hear that. I heard that growing up as well. Like, we don't use mathematics in our everyday life. Like, we just gotta pass this class and then we'll never need it again. Where does all that come from?
I think it's just a lot. Well, if we think about Amos Wilson, one of his lectures, and he probably wrote about this in one of his books as well. There's a political necessity for our children to be deficient in mathematics, so that they'll be deficient in as adults in
Mm,
mathematics. Because what we really got to understand is, and this is something I was not as proficient at in early in my own teaching career, is explaining to children what math really is and what the point of it is. Math is really about problem solving,
hmm
right? But when I think about Malcolm X, and I think about one of the things that he learned from Elijah Muhammad, and that famous one of his many famous quotes, of all of our studies, history is most equipped to reward our research.
hmm
I link that to an idea that I have about mathematics, which is, of all of our studies, mathematics, I believe, is most equipped to develop our critical thinking
mm,
and reasoning and problem solving ability.
hmm
So it's really about the problem solving. And then we take it back to Amos Wilson, talking about the political necessity for our children to be deficient in mathematics. He also said that the problems of the Black community alone represent a multi-billion-dollar industry. So here you have, okay, now, what happens when millions, hundreds of thousands, or millions of Black people learn how to start solving problems and just become problem solvers and become oriented that way, right? Instead of saying, well, now I got to wait for the government to do this, or no, this problem can't be solved, or that's just the way it is. It's just always going to be like this.
hmm
That keeps that profit center intact,
Yeah.
right? Those many billions of dollars. So it's like there has to be a way for, something else Bob Amos talked about was the challenge is to give the appearance that you want these people to actually learn mathematics, while at the same time ensuring that many of them will not.
Mm,
So I say that to say there's a political necessity, like for a lot of us to be, deficient in mathematics, and there has to be a programming and a lot of negative propaganda around mathematics where we believe what I said earlier, like, yo, man, I don't need this shit, man. When I'm
hmm
never use it, right? But again, when people say that, I want to point this out. When people take the position that I'm never going to use the algebra, I'm never going to need geometry, I'm never going to need calculus, it's not, we shouldn't be thinking about whether we individually are going to use it. We should be thinking about those that control the society, if they are using it, and how are
mm,
they using it to influence and affect our everyday life.
mm.
It's just like in politics. A lot of people will say, man, I ain't into politics, I ain't into all that. Well, bro, politics is into you, because
Right.
political decisions are made on a daily basis that affect the cost of eggs. If you're going to be able to, like, drive a certain speed, or if you're going to be able to live in a certain community, if you're going to be able to qualify for a certain job, politicians are making these decisions and creating policies that affect the economics of your community. And a lot of times, like, that ends up, those that results in, okay, are we going to be out here selling dope, or because it's no other jobs out here? Or, okay, well, maybe if there was a different economic policy, because it was a different political decision that was made, right, then that wouldn't be the case. But they're mathematicians that are making these decisions, that are in these think tanks, people with PhDs in mathematics, master's degrees in mathematics. So we got to think about, like, we was talking about this concept of asymmetrical warfare, and that
hmm
applies here. That applies kind of here, right? Because I've heard people, like parents that love their kids, they love their kids, they want the best for their children, saying things like, man, my child don't need to study calculus. They don't need to take higher level math. They'll be all right. They just need some basic arithmetic, and they
hmm
just need to count their money. And I'm like, bro, what do you, so do you ever stop to think, what is it that the people that do know the calculus, do know the differential equations, what are they doing with that knowledge?
hmm
They're working for government entities. They're in these think tanks, in the Heritage Foundation, putting together Project 2025, all these different programs that are going to affect all of our lives, right? They're working for corporations that decide, okay, this is how we're going to market this. These are the algorithms we're going to create to market to these people, to keep them distracted, so they'll be
mm,
counter revolutionary for all their lives, right? They're using the math for that. So if they're using the math to create an environment that dictates the constraints of our lives, why would you not want your children to be
Yeah.
equally matched? It's like you sending your children to a gunfight with a knife, or
Right.
not even with a knife. Like, yo, I'm gonna just teach you how to box.
Yeah.
They got AK-47s over there and AR-15s, but as long as you know how to box, you're gonna be cool. You're not gonna be cool.
Right. Right.
It's not gonna happen. And this is essentially what we're doing. So, when we're as parents, we say, "Nah, I don't need my child don't need to learn all that." No, your child need to learn as much as possible, especially the mathematics. But I think it definitely goes back to this, misconception about what mathematics actually is. Like, we get caught up in the formulas and the equations and the variables and the letters, and just, even the names of the nomenclature of the classes becomes intimidating to us, like calculus. Oh, that just sounds scary. I'm gonna
Mm.
stay away from that. Statistics, that sounds scary. I'm gonna stay away from that. You know what I'm saying? But we gotta lean into that. We gotta like embrace those things and like really, really run towards them,
Yeah.
instead of running away from them like we've been conditioned to do. Because it really, it's not even just about like I already talked about the issue of problem solving, but the other side of that is about, it's the labor market.
Hmm.
It deals with labor market and what job opportunities, what career opportunities we'll have. Because I think about that, when Malcolm X wrote about in his autobiography, talking to his seventh grade English teacher, confiding in him and telling him like, yeah, I'm interested in becoming an attorney one day. And then the teacher says to him, well, Malcolm, you're a nigger,
Mm.
you should think about being a carpenter or
Yeah.
something.
Hmm.
Because of the programming of, the negative propaganda around mathematics, a lot of us, we don't need the racist white teacher to explicitly tell us that no more.
Yeah.
We tell ourselves that.
Yeah.
We implicitly disqualify ourselves by saying like, well, the math is too hard, because algebra especially. So arithmetic is the gatekeeper to algebra. Algebra is the gatekeeper to all the STEM professions. If once you say the math is too hard, you're never going to be a doctor. You're never going to be an RN. You're never going to be a computer scientist. You're never going to be any type of engineer, computer engineer, mechanical, industrial, civil,
Mm.
aerospace. You're never going to be an engineer. You're never going to be an architect, right? And then even a lot of other fields too. And I submit that a lot of people are unsuccessful in entrepreneurship and business because they don't understand mathematical principles. They don't know how to forecast. They don't know how to budget. They don't know how to consider, okay, well, all these things you have to do in business to be successful. A lot of that is just algebra.
Yeah.
It's all algebra. So a lot of times that's why I be like grand opening, grand closing,
Hmm.
because you was just trying to go off a vibe like, all right, well, we're going to sell fish platters and whatnot. And then, hopefully we don't run out.
Right.
But
Right. Right.
if you did the math, you'd have knew when you was going to run out. You'd
Right.
have take all the variables,
Hmm.
the cost of the food, the cost of the styrofoam platters, the population of the community, what the typical behavior of the customers in that community is. You've been able to do some math around all that, or at least consider it mathematically, and make some better business decisions. You know what I'm saying? And while I'm on that note, I want to also address, like Malcolm wanted to be a lawyer. A lot of law deals with logic,
Mm.
right?
Hmm.
A lot of people think geometry is a waste of time because they say, well, I don't want to be an architect, or I don't want to be an interior decorator, so I need to know geometry. What do I care about shapes? It's like, bro, it's not about the shapes. That's only surface level. When somebody says, prove to me that this is a 75-degree angle, that's about proving an assertion. Like somebody says to you, like, yo, this is this, right?
Hmm.
And then how you know they're not lying? That's all it is. So we have rules, right, within geometry that are proven, that are tangible and concrete rules, like such as like the triangle sum theorem, which basically just says if you have a triangle, all three angles of the triangle must have a sum of 180 degrees.
Mm.
So that's why if somebody come to you and tell you like, yo, okay, this is a triangle, but it's got two right angles,
Hmm.
and the right angle has 90 degrees. So it's like, they lying. And how do you
Hmm.
know they lying? This is a geometric proof, right? A rudimentary geometric proof. How you know they lying? Because if it's got two right angles, that means that's 180 degrees in two angles. It ain't no more degrees left over for the third angle, so it
Right.
can't be a triangle. But
Right.
somebody to look you in your face and tell you that. But if you don't have a critical thinking ability and an analytical reasoning ability to know that they lying, know that they plan in your face, then you can't protect yourself.
Yeah.
So the geometry is about learning how to. One aspect is learning how to form a cogent argument, take a position, and consider what makes sense and arrive at a conclusion.
Hmm.
Right? It's almost like, and you know what? Back in 2016, I did a presentation for ASCAC, Association for Study of
Yeah.
Classical African Civilizations, and I was making a critique of the Black Lives Matter movement. And my
Hmm.
critique was I looked at it through a mathematical lens, through the concept, through the idea of a geometric proof. Whereas it seemed as though through their marketing, Black Lives Matter was trying to prove that Black life matters. And my thing is, okay, I don't need to prove that my life matters. That's given information.
Hmm.
We begin at that point, right? That's a
Right.
prerequisite. You know our life matters. What we should be trying to prove is what's the best way to affirm our humanity, to acquire land, resources, education, the things that we need to thrive because we know that our lives matter.
Right.
Trying to prove that your life matters is a losing proposition,
Mm.
right? So, but I was able to arrive at that because of looking at things through a geometric lens or a
Hmm.
mathematical lens. Because I'm like, oh, yo, I remember, like, I was in high school doing geometric proofs,
Hmm.
and I'm like, I just was listening to like their marketing over and over, and I'm like, this don't sit right with me. Because I'm
Mm.
like, why am I trying to prove that? Like,
Right. Right.
you know what I'm saying? All this
Right.
hands up, don't shoot, and all that. Like, no, I
Yeah.
already know my life matters. I already
Mm.
know that. So why we, you know what I'm saying? Like, nah, because when we do a geometric proof, you start with giving information and then you move on from there.
Mm.
You don't prove that. That's not
Hmm.
what we're trying to prove. You know what
Right.
I'm saying? So
Right. Right.
um a lot
That's
of us
deep.
like and you see how like a lot of whether it's in-person conversation or a lot of stuff we see on social media all the time, man, people just have bad takes because they just they never did geometric proofs. I could tell, like, because like what they saying doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up.
Mm.
It doesn't stand up to any type of scrutiny. It's just it's purely based on emotion.
Yes.
Purely emotion. You know what I'm saying? Not to say that emotion is unimportant, but there's got to be a balance, man. We got to have some critical
Absolutely.
thinking involved.
No,
You
that's
know,
bro, that's deep. I want to ask you this. I don't want to get too far off of what um you know, I know we talk about a lot about the youth, obviously, and them learning math. But what about adults that say, hey, whenever I was in school, and I can even say this for myself, whenever I was in school, the way math was taught, it was hard for me to find interest in it, right? And then with that, it began to be a little bit intimidating, right? But as somebody who would no longer, I guess, necessarily be intimidated by it, but has an interest in learning, I guess starting from the beginning, right? And becoming more proficient in math. What would you suggest for adults?
I would say do it. I would
Hmm.
say definitely do it. Like, and here's the thing. I think one thing that prohibits a lot of adults from trying to learn mathematics, in their 20s or in their 30s or even 40s or 50s is this idea. It's kind of like westernized idea of education, where or formal education is done in a school. Once you get to 12th grade, you're done. You might go to college, maybe not, but even if you go to college, once you graduate college, you're done. Like
Hmm.
you've learned everything that needs to be learned. We have to embrace this idea of being lifelong learners. Another thing that's a hindrance to our people, I think, is this idea that um, what is it called? Object permanence. This
Hmm.
idea of, okay, so you may have had a uncomfortable experience when you was in seventh grade or
Hmm.
eighth grade, right, in a math class. But back then you was 13, 14 years old. You're 40 now. Your brain wasn't even fully developed. Your
Right.
frontal lobe, right? Our brains aren't even fully developed when we young like that.
Hmm.
Also, you were a child. You didn't have adult experiences.
Hmm.
Now the math is going to make more sense. The algebra is going to make more sense because now it's like back then you was looking in the textbook reading about renting a car, paying rent and all that.
Hmm.
That's stuff that was foreign to you. You never really did that in real life.
Right.
Now you have years of actual application and lived experience. Mathematics it's a language,
Hmm.
right? It's a way to formalize our lived experiences and put them into a framework.
Hmm.
That's one of the ways to describe mathematics. So now, like you've been grocery shopping, you've been paying rent, a mortgage, you've been paying bills, you've been traveling, you've been budgeting, you've been doing all these things. Now when it's time to like solve equations, now you can say, oh, okay, so this is just like when I do this, or this is just like when I do that. So to anybody watching this, I would say be encouraged because it's not going to be as difficult as it was 20 years ago or 30 years ago when you were a
Yeah.
child.
Right.
It's not due to the mere fact that you've been living life.
Hmm.
So it's naturally going to make more sense. This is one of the reasons that I enjoy teaching adult learners so much Because when I teach the adult learners, they pick up on it. They're like, oh, okay, this is just like this. And I'm like,
Right.
exactly. That's
Right.
exactly what it's like, you know, or, you know what I'm saying? And, it's so that
I
those are
just want to
things.
say this, brother. You have a gift to make mathematics sound exciting. And I think that's an amazing thing. And I did not mean to cut your wisdom, but I just wanted to let you know that while you were building, because here I am. I'm like, okay, I'm about to buy the book, and I'm about to buy the
Yeah,
book, and I'm about to get my study on, man, because um I can't lie, it's always something that I've wanted to go back and do,
yeah.
right? But you have created a pathway for people to do that, and incorporating our Black liberation struggle within all of it is brilliant, man. So just thank you for that, man. I just wanted to
I
say that.
appreciate that, man. I appreciate it. That's that. It feels good to be appreciated and for people to recognize, because that's really the goal. That's really
Hmm.
the goal. Also, I want to say too, like, and this is very critical for me to say, right? Because I want everybody to hear this. Because oftentimes when we encounter people that are very proficient in a subject that a lot of people are deficient in,
Hmm.
we tend to believe, and I think this is like societal programming, right, and conditioning. We tend to believe that that person was just born like that.
Yes.
It was that they never had difficulty. I've had rough patches. Like overall, my kindergarten through 12th grade experience, I was, I did pretty good at math. I was what
Hmm.
you would consider one of them people. Oh, he's good at math, right?
Hmm.
But I had rough patches. I had them times when I'm sitting in class like, what the f is that number four? Like, then I'm like, and then because it's so cumulative that you get lost. On this point, you don't understand. So then the next thing you're not going to understand, and the next thing you're not going to
Yes.
understand, and you a
Right.
child, you embarrassed. You're like, man, I don't want to raise my hands. I don't want these people to look at me like I'm dumb. I
Hmm.
ain't about to do that, right? So I know what that feels like. A
Hmm.
lot of people don't assume that I never knew what that felt like, but I mean, I've known what that felt like. You know what I'm saying? But just not consistently. Where a lot of people they've that has been their consistent experience, like
Yes.
throughout the K through 12, you know what I'm saying, experience. But so I can relate. So
Hmm.
that's another thing that motivates me, because it's almost like, just like people will say, like, I want to prove to myself, I want to overcome this. This is like something that it's like this something that like defeated me when I was a child. Now
Yeah.
I want to beat it. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So I've been able to the subjects that I enjoy teaching the most and tutoring the most are those subjects that gave me trouble when I was younger.
Hmm.
Whether it was like in high school, like I used to hate logarithms. I remember
Hmm.
logarithms used to like make me uncomfortable, like, but now I love logarithms because I learned it.
Hmm.
I learned it.
Hmm.
So like, so I became well versed in it.
Hmm.
Um, and just a lot of topics like that. So I think that's why I'm able to like relate to people, like when they come, for tutoring or whatnot, or, I'm like, look, like, I get it. You know what I'm saying? Like I didn't used to understand this neither, but I think, it helps you when it's time to teach, because you can relate to the person that doesn't understand. Oftentimes, like, schools will try to hire people that are like these experts, right? People that never had issues or challenges in mathematics. Sometimes those people may be the worst teachers,
Mm.
because when the child is sitting there like, yo, I don't get it. You sitting there like, what don't you get? You don't
Yeah.
you don't understand that they don't get it because you never didn't get it,
Right.
right?
Right.
So oftentimes it's the person that did have obstacles that understands, like, okay, it's kind of like
Mm.
somebody that, like, in the community doing community work, you promoting like communal principles, you're trying to provide political education, and you talking to the brothers that's on the block, the brothers that's, they might be out here selling dope. If you was out here selling dope, then you can relate,
Hmm.
because you understand. It's like, yo, I understand the motivation. I understand why you feel like this is a good idea. Let me just show you something different though, bro. As opposed to the person that never experienced that lifestyle, never was involved in that, never, could really relate. And they kind of just, may end up being like more paternalistic, more
Yeah.
condescending. And then
Hmm.
the brothers are trying to hear that shit. I'm like, what?
Right. Right.
Man, like,
Right. Right. Right.
what? But as opposed to somebody that like, okay, no, I get it, bro. I
Hmm.
get it. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? You think that this is the best opportunity for you. And I know why you think that. Because
Hmm.
once upon a time, I thought that too.
Hmm.
So, but check this out though.
Right.
you know. So with the mathematics, it's like sometimes like the person that struggled at one point, now it's like, okay, I get it. I see why you're struggling. I know why you don't understand this, because I remember I ain't understand that part neither. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That part used to trip me up too. But I got you though. I'm gonna explain it to you.
Hmm.
And like, when you'll notice in a lot of my video content, I focus in on these what I call these common mistakes, or these popular errors.
Mm-hmm.
So I put a heavy emphasis on going over those because I noticed that a lot of teachers, they'll teach you how to do the problem. They go step one, step two, step three, step four. But oftentimes, if you like an experienced teacher, you don't know what the kids ain't gonna get.
Yeah.
And that's something I didn't know when I started teaching out back in 2005. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know what they weren't going to understand. But having had the experience, given all the classwork assignments, the homework assignments, the quizzes, the tests, year after year after year after year, doing the tutoring year after year after year, it's like, oh, a large percentage of people, they keep getting this part wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, so that what does that tell you? That's data. That's good data. Okay, I need to focus in on that part,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of people going to mess that up, right? So focus in on that part. So it's almost like with when you study salesman techniques, right?
Mm-hmm.
They say you know, already anticipate what the rebuttal is going to be from the customer
Mm-hmm.
and try to work that into your sales pitch.
Yeah.
So don't even give them a chance to say nah, or I gotta talk to my wife or whatever, or,
Mm-hmm.
all these different things, right? Put that in your sales pitch from the rip. So with the teaching and delivering the lesson, it's like, okay, I know y'all probably at least a significant portion of y'all in this room, y'all not gonna understand this part. So let me focus in on it, and I know why y'all not gonna understand it. So let me like go hard on that part. You know what I'm saying? Um, but yeah, I definitely can relate when people don't understand.
So let me ask you a question. When do children begin to start struggling in math, and why do you think that point is so critical?
I mean, it varies, but I would say a lot of children. I mean, it makes me think of the late rest in peace to Jawanza Kajufu. It makes me think of the fourth grade failure syndrome. A lot of children end up, things get rough, like start to get rough around fourth, fifth grade. And I think in those grades, children are expected to work more independently, and they're expected to like kind of like synthesize information more and build on what they've already been taught. It's not as much straightforward, just kind of like, I don't want to say spoon feeding, but um, it's a different type of instruction that
Hmm.
they may start to receive in fourth and fifth grade. Also, the problem with math is that it's so cumulative.
Yeah.
So if you missed something previously or you weren't strong in something from second grade, then that's going to haunt you in third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade. And there's like this repetitiveness of this reinforcement of these what we call like mathematical blind spots,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? And oftentimes there's not an intervention where they can like go back and get that knowledge. And then what
Yeah.
happens is like ego comes into play too, because we get caught up in like in labels in terms of like, okay, this is third grade math, or this is sixth grade math, or this is first grade math,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
I'm a heavy advocate, and I went to war with people on Instagram about this because it was a clip. You might have seen a clip where I was talking about by third grade, your children need to have their multiplication facts memorized, at least up to 12 times 12 being 144. They got to know that, right? A lot of people don't like that. Now, I think they misinterpreted what I was saying. I wasn't saying like that they shouldn't understand the principles and the concepts of multiplication and the relationship between, multiplication and repeated addition and all these different ways to, find out and, break down that like, 12 times 8 is 96 or whatever, right? Because some people advocate for like, just don't even worry about the actual math involved, just memorize the numbers, right?
Hmm.
I don't believe in that, but I think as a consequence, you're going to end up memorizing from actually doing the math. You're going to end up, having those multiplication facts memorized. You know what I'm saying? Um, so if you don't have those facts memorized, that holds you back in so many other
Yeah.
subsequent topics. I've had a lot of high school students, algebra one, geometry, algebra two, whatever. When you really get down to it and do an analysis of their work, algebra one, algebra two, and geometry is a lot of concepts. It's a
Hmm.
lot of things,
Hmm.
right? It's not that hard to get, right? If you
Hmm.
can understand how video games work, then you can understand how these theories and these concepts work. A lot of times, as the kids don't know how to multiply fractions,
Hmm.
don't know how to find a common denominator so they can subtract fractions.
Hmm.
Don't understand what that is. They don't know their multiplication facts.
Hmm.
If you don't understand your multiplication facts or don't have them memorized, like I advocate for, you end up spending too much time and energy and effort on trying to figure out what 7 times 8 is.
Yeah.
Like, bro, ideally, 7 times 8 should be kind of like if I hear my mom's voice, I know it's my mom on sight immediately. I know that's my mom. If I hear 7 times 8, I know it's 56. That's how we got to get.
Hmm.
If I see, my sister down the street on site, oh, that's my sister. Okay, what's up? About to go holler at her. If I see 7 times 8 written on a board somewhere, I'm immediately thinking 56.
Hmm.
That's how fluent we have to get, and
Hmm.
our children have to get, because that's not something that you're supposed to have to think about when you're in an algebra 1 class in
Yeah.
ninth grade. You're not supposed to have to think about what 7 times 8 is,
Yeah.
right? That ain't nah. You're not supposed to have to think of. That's supposed to be muscle memory,
Right.
just like with sports activity.
Hmm.
That's supposed to be I call it mathematical muscle memory
Hmm.
at that point, and a lot of us don't have that.
Hmm.
We don't learn those foundational. We don't develop those foundational skills,
Yeah.
and then it follows us every year. So that's why a lot of children do poorly. And then on top of that, we don't do math. We
Hmm.
don't practice math,
Hmm.
right? We're not having enough mathematical conversations. And when I say mathematical conversations, I don't mean that we have to create different conversations to have with our children or amongst ourselves. I'm saying this is one of the things I get into in the book. I'm trying to get our community to move in this direction. Take the conversations that you already having with your kids
Yeah.
and extract mathematical content from them. Start adding mathematical questions. One of the chapters in the book, I call it, it's probably my favorite chapter. What is your negative age?
Mm.
This comes from just me having a conversation with my daughter Assata when she was younger. She's 13 now, but probably I started doing this when she was like 7, right?
Hmm.
One day I was telling her a story, because how we always tell kids, like, back when I was your age, we always had
Yeah.
these back in my day
Yeah.
stories, right?
Yeah.
But I realized that's an organic opportunity to introduce negative numbers, the number line,
Mm.
addition and subtraction with positive and negative numbers. Because
Hmm.
I'm telling Asada a story about something I did when I was 7, when I was her age at the time. And I'm like, Asada, how old were you when that happened? And of course, she looks at me like I'm crazy, like I'm bugging, right? Because she knows that. She's like, Dad, I wasn't even born yet. I'm like, I know, but I'm trying to introduce you to the negative numbers and all that, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So so then she has to do some mathematics. So she knows, okay, she knows how old I was at the time.
Hmm.
So then she's able to figure out, okay, well, what year was my dad born? Okay, he was born in 1980.
Hmm.
If this happened when he was 7, that's 1980 plus 7. That takes
Hmm.
us up to 1887. Boom. Okay. I know I was born in 2012. So now she got to calculate the difference between 2012 and 1987. Right. So then once she figures that out, what's that like? See, 1990, 10, 22, 22, and 3. That's 25 years, right?
Hmm.
It's a 25-year gap between 1987 and 2012. So that means when that happened, she was negative 25 years old.
Hmm.
So just imagine all these conversations we have with our children, our
Mm.
nieces, nephews, little cousins, whoever, young brothers on the block, young sisters around the way, right?
Hmm.
We can just introduce that, and
Hmm.
just to get them thinking about like negative numbers, because that's another thing that holds people up. And I also have a theory about, just as a concept, negative numbers, us thinking about a lot of things. Like, for one, in terms of financial literacy, right? Well, I know that's a buzz term now. I think we really need economic. The financial literacy should lead us to economic literacy and have some deeper conversations about monopoly capitalism and all
Right.
that. Because if we constantly doing all this stuff to try to defend ourselves against being exploited and preyed on, we should take a step back and say, well, why we got to have a system where we constantly got to be on the defensive all the time?
Right.
But at any rate,
Right. Right.
a lot of people, somebody might overdraw their checking account.
Hmm.
So now they
Hmm.
got negative 300 in their checking account, right?
Yeah. Right. Right.
So when you got negative 300, you're like, well, I don't have no money to take out,
Hmm.
right? But people don't understand. A lot of people may not understand, having a negative $300 balance and having a $0 balance ain't the same thing. Because when you go deposit 400 in that account and you had a negative 300
I
balance,
have $100.
exactly, you're gonna have $100, but you're expecting to be able to pull out, go to the ATM machine and pull out $400, and then when you can't, you mad
Right. Right.
because you don't understand the math, you don't understand the concept of the number line and the negative numbers versus positive numbers, right? Also, this is where we get into the political science aspect and other
Hmm.
math. One of the many ways, net positives and net negatives. So I noticed you having a lot of conversation online about the police state
Hmm.
and deploying the National Guard and everything. People aren't thinking about if it's a net negative or net positive. I mean, I get it. I get the dialectical materialism. Nothing is all good, nothing is all bad. Okay, National Guard comes, maybe there will be a decrease in crime. Okay, but is that a net positive,
Right.
or is it a net? Let's consider all the factors, and also let's not look at it just in the context of, like, in algebra, we deal with the coordinate plane. We got the x-axis and the y-axis. So you look at a graph. The graph might be a curve going like this. You look at it at certain intervals. Okay, X, look at the graph when X is between +1 and +3, or when it's between +3 and +8. The time horizon is important.
Hmm.
Maybe for 2 weeks in DC, and I haven't confirmed these statistics that people are throwing around. They talking
Yeah.
about no murder in DC in 2 weeks. Okay, cool. Maybe that let's concede that that's true. But what's it gonna look like for a year?
Right.
What's it gonna look like for 2 years,
Right.
5 years, 10 years? Is it a net positive or is it a net negative? Or are we even thinking in terms of that? Or are we just focused on this instantaneous moment in time right now?
Hmm.
All of that is algebraic.
Mm.
That's algebra. And actually, that's calculus. When we get into calculus, we're kind of trained to think like that. So again, like with the math, just doing math, it helps us to develop our critical thinking ability. So a lot of, and I'm of the belief that a lot of times our people don't agree with what we say, maybe. And that's not to say that we're always correct, because we have to constantly refine our own analyses too, right? But a lot of times stuff is just very basic and very clear. Like, bro, we shouldn't be doing this, bro. Or this is
Hmm.
not the best route for us to take. These are mathematics. For me, it's like, damn, this is like I got to a point in my teaching career where I was like, okay, I'm studying, Amos Wilson, or I'm studying like, Kwame Ture, or Dr. Bobby Wright or whatever. And I'm like, what they just said, like that's nah, because I just taught that last week, because that reminds me of solving systems of equations.
Mm.
What he just said, or you know what I'm saying, or what Marimba Ani, what she said at Yorugu, like nah, that remind me of something. That sounds real familiar right now. So I'm like, oh, okay. And I
Well,
think that
can I
part of
can I ask you this? Like, you know
yeah,
how
yeah,
like you see math in a lot of things in
yeah.
everything. When we all begin to be more proficient in math, is that just what happens with the brain where you just start seeing mathematics in everything the way you do?
I think so. I mean, and I think that's with any
Hmm.
subject, or any area of it. Like, somebody that I made this parallel the other day, like somebody that plays like basketball
Hmm.
constantly.
Hmm.
Like when they go into a room, they might envision a room as a court.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
You know what I mean? Or, somebody that raps. I remember watching years ago, listen, heard Papoose say this, and it resonated with me. He said, like as I'm just going through my everyday life, I just think of rhymes.
Mm.
Like every situation I'm in, I just might think of a freestyle
Hmm.
based on that situation, or how to incorporate like what I'm doing right now, no matter
Hmm.
what it is.
Right,
Right.
right.
So I see that like the same thing with like being immersed in mathematics.
Hmm.
Like start to see things, and like and for me, it's different for me too, because I'm like aggressively, purposefully trying to find like math problems, trying to
Mm.
find like, like I listen to music, and I
Hmm.
also for a few years I've been doing this. I've been trying to extract, like if I hear like key terms
Hmm.
in somebody's rhyme, like I was listening to Illmatic last night. Of course, New York State of Mind.
Hmm.
Said life is parallel to hell, but I must maintain. Oh, parallel. That's geometry. You know what I'm saying? Like so as a way to like,
That's dope.
introduce it. As a way to
Hmm.
introduce it, like, okay, that's a concept. Because when you like it's kind of wild how, and this proves that like we can understand mathematics, because anybody that ever listened to Illmatic, listen to New York State of Mind,
Hmm.
when they heard Nas say life is parallel to hell, but I must maintain, we can interpret and comprehend what he's saying.
Hmm. Hmm.
You know what that means. So if we can understand the use of the word parallel in that context, we should be able to understand the use of the term parallel in the context of pure geometry.
Right, right.
Two lines that will never intersect, two lines at every point, all the pairs of corresponding points of the lines are always going to be equidistant. They're never going to cross each other, right? We should be able to understand that. And then there are different, principles and different rules or whatever
Yeah,
that, we deal with because of that relationship.
yeah.
So if you can understand what Nas was talking about when he said it,
Hmm.
right? You should be able to understand it in the geometry classroom. But here's the other thing. The fact that so many people don't understand it in the geometry classroom, and it's really the same thing, shows that there's something going on.
Hmm.
There's something going on that is actively prohibiting us from thinking that it's that simple. Because a lot of us
Yeah.
think it can't be that easy.
Right, 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 right.
So that leads me to like, it further, it reinforces my belief in that conclusion that there's a political, like what Amos Wilson said, there's a political necessity for that we can't learn this. So they gotta socialize us and program us to believe that we can't do math.
Mm.
You got to keep them away from math,
Hmm.
no matter what. You got to keep them away from math, because once we really get into the math, we start asking questions.
Yeah.
We start thinking about, okay, well, why are they doing this? And then we also start thinking critically. And then we start thinking like, okay, well, the government tells us they're going to do this. So this corporation tells us they're going to do this. And even though they dress it up, they market it a certain way, make it seem like it's decent, make it seem like it's going to help us. We're critically analyzing what's happening and what they're saying. And then we're realizing like, no, this is not going to be a net positive.
Right.
This is going to
Right.
be a net negative. It might be great for the next 30 days or the next
Mm-hmm.
60 days. But
Mm-hmm.
what about after the 60 days? Then what? What happens when the honeymoon is over? Honeymoon's
Right.
over. Then what we gonna do? Right? But that comes from critical analysis. So you have too many people asking questions and challenging things.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So my belief is that we got to keep the people away. It's just like with reading during chattel slavery.
Yeah.
Frederick Douglass,
Yeah.
knowledge. He arrived at the conclusion. He heard what Master Ald, I think his name was, said to his wife. Knowledge makes you unfit to be a slave. He'll be useless to himself if you teach him how to read, because
Mm-hmm.
then he'll start to ask questions like, "Damn, why am I a slave in the first place?"
Mm-hmm.
But he gonna know too much.
Yes.
Mathematics serves the same purpose. Then we start
Hmm.
asking questions. We start thinking about the world in a different way. We start to, because all these mathematical principles are, just they're social science principles,
Yeah.
right? And then and also it's a way to just, one of the things that people miss out on is like, in the algebra class, in the geometry class, in the pre-calculus class, it's a way to just like practice critical thinking
Bro,
and condition your brain for critical thinking on a
if
daily basis.
if this was taught to me, like when I was in high school, I was already on, Malcolm and Garvey and Du Bois, and that was my thing. But I didn't have much of an interest in math. But if it would have been taught to me in this manner, I
It's gonna be easy
absolutely
for you.
would have, yeah, I would have
And
absolutely had an
when,
interest in it.
and when you go in, it's gonna be easy because you're already on the political analysis.
Mhm.
The math is gonna be cake.
Mm. Yeah, I'm
The
looking.
math's gonna be cake.
I'm ordering the book today. I'm definitely looking forward to definitely looking forward to diving in and just because again it's something that I've always wanted to do.
Another
Uh,
thing I can say, if I can say
mhm.
something else
Yeah,
about that,
for
like
sure, for
I think
sure.
I think about a lot of our revolutionary scholars. I think about Cabral. Cabral
Hmm.
comes to me. So Cabral went to Portugal and studied agricultural engineering. He's doing engineering. I know he was doing the algebra, doing the calc 1, calculus 2, calculus 3. He had to take those high level math classes. He comes back to Guinea-Bissau, and he's like, wait, no, instead of me just being a assimilationist and kind of being a buffer, neo-colonial like tool,
Hmm.
right? No, we need this is our land. We need the land,
Yeah.
right? We need to be revolutionary. I think about people like him, and I have to believe that their understanding of mathematics led them to that conclusion. Like, yeah, this is the best course of action.
Mm.
Sundiata Kohli
Hmm.
was a mathematics major at Prairie View A&M University.
Wow.
Brother was a mathematician.
Wow.
Brother was a mathematician. So I'm sure with him, he's like, yeah, nah, the Black Liberation Army. This is the only way.
Hmm. Hmm.
I've done the math on this.
Yeah. Right.
This
Right.
makes this makes sense.
Right. Right.
This makes sense, right? These
Wow.
people, they were studying the mathematics, and I'm sure that I mean, even somebody like Kwame Ture was a philosophy major at Howard. What a lot of philosophers that I know say philosophy is just math for words.
Mm.
Yeah, that's really all it is. The logic, it's like equations, like, okay, if this is this, then that's that. And he talks about you probably remember in Ready for Revolution, he talks about being at Howard in undergrad and helping people with math because he,
Yep.
he had a strong math background.
Hmm.
So I'm just convinced that like a lot of these people, I think I'm similar to a lot of them, whereas like I believe math to be true.
Yes.
Like, math reveals itself as true. Like when I talk to students, I'm like, when you solve an equation, you're trying to find the truth. That's what it's about. You know what I'm saying? It's finding the truth. So that's why when we check the word, you take that. If you solve an equation, you get like, okay, x equals 5. All right, cool. How do you know that's right? Let's go back, run it back, throw that 5 into the original equation, do the computation, and see if you get a true statement. So on the left side of the equation, when you simplify everything, add, subtract, divide, whatever you got to do, the left side should be equivalent to the right side. So if you end up with 5 equals 5, that's a true statement.
Mm.
Correct answers lead us to the truth,
Hmm.
right? Now, if I get something that's like 5 equals 38, something ain't right. either I'm wrong, or maybe when I was checking it, I was wrong, right? So, I think about the King quote that Fred Hampton echoed. If he talks about you'll have answers that don't answer, explanations that don't explain, and solutions that don't solve, right? When I heard them say that, I'm like, oh, this is mathematics. That's
Right,
all this is.
right.
This is mathematics. So yeah, so it's just that's really what it is.
Nah, that's man. And I love how you weave math and then the liberation struggle and connect it, man. It just that's powerful. You've also created, and no, actually I want to go here first because I think it's important for people that might not even know, and I think it is something that when black kids find out that um can make them maybe more interested in math because they know that they come from a people that have a history in math. And when we talk about African societies and, like the Inshago bone being one of the earliest examples of mathematical tools, do you think, centering, well, when we are teaching the black youth about math, does it help to show that they come from a community that has always valued math, pre-colonial times and all?
I think as long as they come from a community that values, their connection to Africa and their
Hmm.
connection to the continent, West African civilizations, Central African, ancient Kemet,
Hmm.
Nubia,
Hmm.
because the thing I think about it in terms of that is like that was good for me
Hmm.
because from a young child, my parents, when I was like an infant and a toddler, we had the map of Africa on the wall,
Yeah.
poster of Marcus Garvey in the house, things like
Hmm.
that. So I was kind of, indoctrinated into that. I know the word indoctrinate has like a negative connotation, but it was a positive
Yes.
indoctrination. Been indoctrinated into my culture, right? Um, so telling somebody like that, like, okay, yeah, your ancestors was doing this, right? But I think part of the problem, though, there's a limitation with that because if the child doesn't already have, and I think sometimes those of us in the, I guess the so-called conscious community,
Yeah.
we skip over this.
Hmm.
Um, if the child doesn't have that connection to Africa, then it ends up being not as helpful,
Yeah. Hmm.
you know.
Hmm.
Um, but as long as like if they identify and they have, some awareness that, these are your people, yeah, and like we've always done this,
Yeah.
you know, then it can be helpful. It definitely can be helpful, or even like going like not even as far back. Even you might want to start off with just more recent times.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the elements of my Hismatics framework is black mathematical exemplars, where I talk about people like Sundiata Kohli. I'm like, no, y'all need to know that brother has a whole math degree.
Hmm.
He's a mathematician, like real shit. Like he's a mathematician for real.
Right.
Um, and studied math like on a high level. And just a lot of the black mathematicians, people that reach earned PhDs in mathematics, while at the same time being careful that I don't reinforce this idea that we weren't doing math on the continent and that we didn't learn math until we
We
came
got
here.
here. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think that also is a game that these Europeans will play. Like they'll be
Hmm.
like, oh, okay, yeah, this person was the first black person to get a PhD in mathematics, and then you get you because a lot of us we lack self esteem and we're like ego starved,
Yeah.
so we want to feel like that we have value, so we'll latch on to that
Hmm.
with kind of like, but part of what happens is then we start to think like, oh, we didn't start doing math till we came here.
Right.
But Imhotep was doing math and like we was doing high level math when we was designing and building pyramids
Right.
like 10,000 years ago and
Right.
probably even before, right? So we got to so that's an important conversation because it's like, yeah, I want you to know about Dr. Abdul Alim Shabazz, you know what I'm saying, who was known for educating more African American black math PhDs in this country than anybody, like
Mm.
more studied under him than anybody.
Wow.
Dr. David Blackwell, Etta Zuber Falconer, who taught at Spelman for many years, taught math at Spelman for many years, and like taught a lot of sisters, mathematics on a high level. Evelyn Granville Boyd, a lot of these people. I want you to know about these people, but don't get it confused though. Don't get caught up in the whole like don't because how they do with everything. They try to make it an example of American exceptionalism.
Absolutely.
It's like y'all good at math, but because on the low, it's like they want us to think, okay, yeah, y'all good at math, but y'all only good at math because y'all learn from us,
Yes.
right?
Right.
Because the whole like first black person to do something, it's not even really, it's not a flex for us as much as it is a flex for them. They trying to flex. They like, yo, we taught y'all that. They
Yeah.
want us to think that if not for them,
Hmm.
we would not have been doing these things.
Right.
And when you're not grounded and don't have like an African centered worldview, you'll fall for that.
Right.
And then you end up being complicit in a lot of things that they want to do
Hmm.
that are harmful to your community. You end up being weaponized against your community,
Yeah.
which is another aspect of why the Hismatics teaching framework is important to me, because we have a lot of black children that are brilliant and that learn are learning mathematics, they're learning sciences, they're going to go into the STEM disciplines.
Hmm.
However, their political orientation is trash,
Right.
right? It's trash, right? So
Right.
I'm like, all right,
I'm glad you said that because it's extremely important because people don't really understand. And I want you to finish that thought that you can be a lot of it could be really harmful to the community to go out in there and with this STEM degree that you have and maybe make weapons of mass destruction that are going to, you know, hurt nations in the global south or whatever. But yeah, you could go ahead and continue.
exactly. So I'm like, all right, so if you're young, you might be, young, and you're ahead of the curve. You study algebra 2 in middle school age, which I think more of us should be doing. Like I see, you probably see the brother Marcus Klein at his
Hmm.
school. I'm in Chicago. They doing algebra in second and third grade. That has to become the standard.
Right.
That should become the standard, and we gotta get to the point where we don't even see that as like as above and beyond. We gotta normalize that. That's got to be the norm. That can't even be an outlier. That's how we got it. We got to get to that point, right? Um, but while you're doing that, you got to learn about Thomas Sankara. You got to learn about Paul Robeson.
See,
You got to
that's what I
learn
want
about
you
Ida
to
B. Wells.
talk about your hystematics.
Yeah.
Amazing method of blending history and mathematics. For the people that haven't been tapped in, can you talk about exactly what it is?
Yeah. So simply put, it's using Black history to teach mathematics and using mathematics to teach Black history. So
Mm,
just using like the math as an
powerful.
entry point.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? One of the elements I mentioned is Black math exemplars.
Hmm.
So Black people that studied mathematics, that earned degrees in mathematics and taught mathematics. Also, people that just used mathematics that may not have been um, we may not see them as like mathematicians, but they definitely use mathematics. Like I think of a Du Bois. Du Bois wrote the Philadelphia Negro. That's like
Hmm.
a statistics textbook, basically,
Mm,
with history in it, right?
mm,
And it's giving explanations, right?
yeah.
You look at all the charts and the graphs, and
Mm, Black
the
Reconstruction as
averages and
well.
all of that. The
Hmm.
data, like in Krumah, and neo-colonialism, the last stage of imperialism. He's and see, this is this another thing too. A lot of times we get accounts of our history that are more anecdotal,
Hmm.
which is cool. But some people, like I remember thinking about this when I was reading in Krumah, neo-colonialism, last stage of imperialism. Because in Krumah, and I was a finance major at Morgan State.
Hmm.
My mentality was not the same. It was not what it is now back then, right?
Hmm.
Back then, I'm a finance major. I was trying to become an investment banker. I was trying to go help them rape and pillage and steal
Yeah.
from African nations the resources and then, get the bag basically. That was my mentality at that stage in my life, right? But I'm reading that book and I'm like, damn, this is like a finance textbook.
Hmm.
Because Nkrumah is doing is he's breaking it down pound for pound. How much bauxite did the French steal? How much tin did the Belgians take? How much rubber did they get out the con, like specific, like to the ounce? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Hmm.
and so I'm looking at it like through a mathematical lens, like, okay, this is more specific. He's being even more specific, which is better because it's almost like it's one thing if you say, damn, they robbed me.
Hmm.
It's fucked up. But it's different if you say, you know what, on a bi-weekly basis, they were siphoning off 13% of my paycheck every 2 weeks. And they did this for a 5-year period. Like, okay, now we
Now I have a
specific.
total of how much
Not
they owe me.
Yeah, I know exactly how much they. Yeah, and I know how frequent the frequency with which they was doing it.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Which is slope, by the way. If anybody watching this,
Mm.
anybody that thinks why equals mx plus b is irrelevant. No, m is the slope, the rate at which something happens, right?
Mm.
Um, so yeah, so it puts a different, it hits different when you know more details,
Yes.
and the math allows you to do the quantitative analysis, the quantitative reasoning, right? So yeah, so hits the math. That's one element is the black math exemplars. Another element is numerical triggers,
Hmm.
where I create math problems that have certain result in certain numbers,
Right.
purposefully, so a child will remember dates,
Mm.
dates or amounts. Like I might create a problem that has a sum. Add two numbers together. It's got a sum of 1,791, and then as soon as we get to the answer, I'm like, y'all know what happened in 1791? Haitian Revolution pops off. Now, because a lot of it came out of just me, like just being in the classroom at different schools I taught at, and I'm just like, how kids get bored sometimes.
Yeah.
As a teacher, I'm like, yo, I really don't want to teach this today, bro. Like, I gotta like, it's cool, but I don't want to teach this today because last night I was studying I was reading Black Jacobins last night,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
want to talk to them about this
Right.
because they need to know about this right now. Like, you know what I'm saying? So
Hmm.
I'm like, how can I incorporate it?
Hmm.
Whereas, like, if anybody come in, the principal or somebody come in, like, Mr. Parker, like, this wasn't in your lesson plan,
Right.
but how can I incorporate it in a way that's organic
Hmm.
and that makes sense, right? So, but once we get to 1791, now we're about to talk about Dessalines real quick.
Mm.
We're going to talk about Tucson. We talk about Bukma and Duddy, say Sil Fatima. We're going to talk about, Macondo from before,
Hmm.
right? And the Maroons, up there, right? So we're going to talk about all that, right? But it all came from the number. We ended up at 1791. Or we might have an answer that ends up 1,804. Oh, that's
Yeah.
what it ended.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like, so numerical triggers were 381. That's significant. The Montgomery bus boycott lasted 381 days.
Mm.
So we got all these numbers and dates in our history.
Hmm.
We can make math problems out of all these numbers and
Man,
dates.
that's amazing. Man, brother,
So,
yeah,
so I
that's
think about, but real quick though, I think
mm,
about, like, how the gamblers say, don't leave money on the table.
yeah.
I think back on, like, before I kind of formalized this teaching framework, how much money I left on the table because all them numbers, all them practice problems.
Mm.
I could have been more intentional and said, you know what? Why don't I use this problem so I end up with this number? And once we get to this number, then we can have a conversation about this thing that
Yeah.
happened on this date.
Right, 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 right.
And then they'll remember that. So I'm like, my hope is that, okay, whenever you see the number 1791, it's just like rap music. Like, it's so much stuff I remember just because I heard it in a song.
Hmm.
It
Hmm.
might have been nonsense, but because I heard it in a song, I'm never going to forget it.
Hmm. Have,
You know what I'm
have
saying?
have you seen people? Well, I mean, like, what do you think about using things like music and rhyme to help people learn math? Is that effective?
I think so.
Hmm.
I think so. Because, like, especially in terms of, like, just, memorizing, like, algorithms and
Hmm.
formulas,
Hmm.
plus there's like I mean, math is, music can be modeled mathematically. Like, you think about trigonometry, sound waves,
Hmm.
sine waves, cosine waves, tangent waves. I think of how when it's a topic that I'm really well versed at, I like to turn on the music and just do problems to a beat
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it's like I find myself like getting into the rhythm of it,
Mm.
right?
Hmm.
When it's something that I'm not as well versed in, I need it quiet
Yeah.
so I can focus and lock in,
Hmm.
right? I can't use the music doesn't help me in those situations, right? But once like stuff I've been doing for like 30 years and stuff um, it kind of helps me, because it's like a rhythm to it,
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, I definitely think like music is it can be helpful with that. But those are two of the elements. I mean, other elements are like, I mean, I've kind of been talking about it, like, you know, Africa. What is it? The specific titles of the elements escape me, but there's statistics of the African experience.
Hmm.
That's another element. Just dealing with statistics. What are the statistics? But then getting into, like, confidence intervals and sample sizes and just different things like that. Like, because a lot of information that gets spread will not stand up to statistical scrutiny at all, but it's normalized because people don't have a understanding of statistics for real. They just don't. So, and this a lot of this stuff is able to fly because of the lack of awareness that
Mm-hmm.
people have. Um, there's also what I call double entendres. African center like double entendres where like it'll be something in a mathematical context that can also apply in the terms of African history or African American history. Like are you familiar with the book by Bob Moses, co-authored the late Bob Moses, rest in peace to Bob Moses,
Radical equations.
Radical Equations.
Yep.
One day I'm years ago, I'm solving some radical equations. And I start to think to myself, I'm like, yo, because I'm thinking about like how I would explain this to students. It's basically two steps to
Mm-hmm.
solve a radical equation. Like the square root of x plus 3 equals 14. We trying to solve for x, but the x plus 3 is in the under the radical sign, right? So x plus 3 will be the radicand, so to speak. The two things you got to do, you got to isolate the radical and then eliminate the radical.
Mm-hmm.
And then you carry on as if it's a simpler equation. And I think, and I'm like, yo, this is what COINTELPRO does.
Mm-hmm.
These are the two steps. You identify the radicals, isolate the radicals from the community, from the larger community, and then you attempt to do that, and then you try to eliminate them either by assassination attempt or incarceration, give them a life sentence, do them like Mumia Abu Jamal, um, Imam Jamil Alameen, formerly H. Rat Brown. This is what you do. So in teaching that skill, that's a conversation that we have. So they'll remember, okay, these are the steps, because it's the same thing that the government does and has done.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So then you also remember
Mm-hmm.
the history lesson, and then you have the political awareness. Like I said, it's like incorporating political education at the same time with the algebra 2 lesson. So, and another example would be one of Malcolm's speeches. He talks about this cycle of poverty in poor communities, poor Black communities. He says, you're born into a poor community, and then because you live in a poor community as a child, you end up attending a school in the poor community that provides poor education with teachers that are poorly trained. Then you matriculate through that school system, and then you graduate. And then because of your poor education, you only qualify for low paying jobs. So you end up living in that same poor community or the same type of poor community. And that's the cycle of poverty. So it's maintained. So with that, and I'm when I heard him say that, I'm like, okay, this is a circle. It's a cycle, so it's a circle. So then I'm like, I would then segue into circle geometry. So anything dealing with a circle, we can find the area of a circle, we can find the circumference of a circle, we can find the diameter, the radius, we can talk about the vocabulary terms, um, the area of a sector of a circle, um, the length of an arc in the circle, all these different things. But so it's like instead of just saying, all right, class, brothers and sisters, we're gonna talk about some circle geometry today. Before we do that, let's talk about Malcolm, how Malcolm utilized a circle to express a
Mm-hmm.
point.
Right.
And it's a lot of examples like that. It's a lot of examples like that. I think of like the conversation you've been having, man, like about the police state and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I think about factoring.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked about this on a radio show I was on the other day, and another program here in Philly that I was on. And I think about like, so because the idea, I've seen a lot of people in Philadelphia
Mm-hmm.
in support of the militarization, deployment of the National Guard or what have you. And what I think about is like, I think there's some underlying assumptions that they're making that may be inappropriate,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people are like, they're similar to me. They're middle class Black people, right? Um, and they're making this assumption that these law enforcement officials will somehow, they'll be able to do what teachers are expected to do, which is differentiate.
Mm-hmm.
Differentiate between the so-called bad Black people or the YNs with the shiesties on and everything, hanging out on the corner, right? And the so-called good Black kids. I'm like, that's not how this works. Historically, that's not how this works. The common factor is not criminality. The common factor is Blackness.
Absolutely.
And this is what people are not realizing. So it's like it don't matter. Like in your mind, you're making a fundamental assumption that because your child is a straight A student, your child don't bother nobody. Your child go to school, come home, play the video game. Maybe they, you know, play tennis and they go to violin lessons or whatever. You think these law enforcement officials not gonna fuck with your kid?
Right.
They still gonna fuck with your kid.
Right.
It's not gonna make a difference. And then you guys sit back and think, damn, I invited this.
Hmm.
So again, this is where the analysis comes into play because that's mathematical thinking. Like, okay, what's the because we're thinking that the common factor when you if you look at a an algebraic expression and you have to factor it into separate linear expressions, what's the common factor? What's the GCF?
Mm.
Right? People are thinking, and see again, we're doing mathematics without realizing it. We're doing algebra without realizing it. You're thinking that the common factor is criminality.
Right.
It's like well, they only got they're gonna find it, the bad kids. They're only gonna fuck with the YNs. They're not.
Right.
They gonna fuck with everybody.
Right. Right.
Because that's what happens. That's what happens in a police state.
Right.
And this is what people are not understanding. So this is the way to take a an algebraic concept
Hmm.
and make it real and
Right.
make it concrete. And this is part of this is part and parcel of Hismatics. That's what Hismatics is meant to do. Another thing, I've had the opportunity to partner with my father's nonprofit, the William J. Watkins Senior Educational Institute, based in Baltimore.
Mm.
And for the last 2 summers, we've ran a summer program
Hmm.
where I've taken different books and I've used those books as math textbooks.
Hmm.
So last summer, we read, so it was a 5 week program. We read portions of each of a different book each of the 5 weeks. So last summer, it was The Narrative of Frederick Douglass,
Hmm.
Black Power by Kwame Ture and Charles V. Hamilton, um, Assata by Assata Shakur, Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson. The fifth book. What was the fifth book? What was it? Oh, Autobiography of Malcolm X. So each week we look at excerpts from those books, and I created math word problems
Wow.
based on the content in those books.
Hmm.
That's what we did. Summer number one. Summer number two was this summer, just ended a few weeks ago. Um, what were our books this summer? France Fanon,
Mm.
Wretched Earth. At this point, I'm just like, I know what schools these kids go to. I know what they're not going to be exposed to,
Hmm.
but I know what they need to be exposed to.
Hmm.
So I'm like, okay, so I got an audience. Okay, cool. This is what we about to get into. So France Fanon, Wretched of the Earth. We read Amos Wilson, African Centered Consciousness versus the New World Order.
Hmm.
Um, what else we get into? Ida B. Wells, The Red Record.
Mm.
We talked about that.
Wow.
We talked about Frazier, E. Franklin Frazier, the Black
Hmm.
Bourgeoisie.
Hmm.
We talked about that. What was the fifth book? I picked this book because my nephew was in the program and he wants to play football. So I'm like, all right, cool. I want you to, develop, start to look at sports through a political lens. So we read portions of $40 Million Slaves
Wow. Right.
by William Roden. So
Mm.
I take those books and I create math word problems
Mm.
from the content. And also like we're reading the book. So it's like, it's like English, they get like ELA practice, developing their vocabulary. One of the things I realized is like, kids, well, I mean, people in general, like we're not reading.
Yeah.
So we're not used to reading, especially not complex text, reading, text that make you have to think and process and analyze and assess. So that's something we got to get back to. We got to get back to the reading because it helps with, even in mathematics, because then what we can do is we can understand word problems better.
Mm.
A lot of times when you hear these reports of these standardized test scores that are like so abysmal, it's not just the raw math, it's the way the questions are worded, it's the word problems, and a lot of the children I think don't if they're not accustomed to practicing with those types of problems, they're not going to be able to understand it.
And also,
So yeah, so that's another thing we do in history.
and what you're doing again, I just have to keep giving you props, man, because it's amazing to hear. Because I remember being in school and, you know, Johnny has five apples. I don't give a damn about Johnny or his apples. But if
Yeah,
you're creating a word problem, from from autobiography of Malcolm X. You have my attention then, right?
You don't care about that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I think I just think when it comes to learning, right, and how education in America can be so Eurocentric, where we don't see ourselves in any of these classes and disciplines that are being taught.
Right.
And what you are doing is amazing. And I had I think I'm going to even start like because I read a lot, and I'm going to start finding the math in the stuff that I read.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm gonna tell you what one of my tricks when I read books and that. Well, I started this maybe about 4 or 5 years ago.
Hmm.
I read books and I find any type of like quantitative data, like whether it's a date, whether it's a an amount, a percentage, a fraction. Um, I write so AT all this math ATM.
Hmm.
I write ATM and put a circle on it. So I need to go back. When I go back to that book, I can just like I can like mine for potential problems.
Yes, yes.
You know what I'm saying? Any book I read, so I do that with any book I read. So like right now I'm reading um Civil War on Race Street
Nice.
about Cambridge.
Hmm.
So, at some point I may, come up with a curriculum or like maybe a hundred word problems. So it's like, yeah, we need to read, we need to be familiar with, what was going on in Cambridge, and that, Cambridge is significant to me because I'm thinking about like commercial rap music and I think about, 1996 when Jay-Z became popular and he
Hmm.
was introduced to us. And Reasonable Doubt came out, um, the song "Feeling It,"
Yeah.
where it talks about them towns like Cambridge that I, used to hustle and I kill with shit.
Hmm.
So my introduction to Cambridge, Maryland, was through Jay Z rapping about being a drug dealer down there.
Yeah.
The problem is I didn't know about Gloria Richardson.
Mm.
I didn't know about H. Brown being down there in 1967. I
Hmm.
didn't know about SNCC. I didn't know about none of that. And I think that's the challenge that a lot of our youth run into. It's like they just don't know.
Yeah.
Because and then the mainstream will give us the commercial rapper
Hmm.
to keep us distracted and counter revolutionary,
Hmm.
and then we become oriented to so many places and so many things and so many activities only in that one way.
Yeah.
And then that mixed with being a child and not having discernment, it's even more problematic. And I'm not going to say like I'm not going to sit up here and act like I don't listen to the music.
Yeah,
I
of
do
course.
listen to the music.
Yeah.
I listen to a lot of problematic music.
It's
I
right.
can
Me
I
too.
can
Me
admit that.
too.
I can admit that. You know what I'm saying? But the difference is like I have discernment. I'm able to sit back and be like, damn, like because for me, honestly, a lot of it is like comedy. It's like,
Hmm.
bro,
Yeah. Right.
you
Right.
can say
Right.
that, bro. Like, but the sad part is like it's young people out here that take it seriously. Like they think it's real. Like,
Hmm.
you know what I'm saying? And I
Hmm.
can relate because once upon a time I thought it was real too.
Right. Hmm.
You know. But yeah, like, so yeah, just definitely do that. Like, like that's what I do, man. I try to find different ways to connect the mathematics with the history, like any way possible, like
Yeah.
just to make it more relevant.
I've
you know
never, I've never seen or heard math being taught this way, man. And
yeah.
you definitely deserve all the props.
Just can I say
Before,
something? Can I
yeah,
say something?
absolutely, absolutely.
On a very fundamental level, I know I mentioned like part of the reason for Hismatics is because like I be in class as a classroom teacher, and I'm like, I don't want to teach this shit today, man. I
Yeah,
want to.
yeah.
I'm trying to talk about Assata Shakur. I was just reading Assata yesterday. Like that sister was dope, man. Like what I'm saying.
Hmm.
Like so, I want to talk about her, but I got to figure out a way to like incorporate it. Um, damn, I lost my train of thought. It'll come back to me. It'll come back to me.
Yeah, no problem. But yeah, I was going to ask you, whenever you, I guess, are, teaching the youth and whenever they begin to, I guess, struggle with something, right? As far as a type of math that they're learning. Did you find, because I know you mentioned it earlier, do you find that when it comes to um, learning math and maybe having some difficulties in an area that more than likely a lot of people are having difficulties in that same area when it comes to teaching math? I mean, or learning math?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of like I said earlier, they're like popular errors.
Yeah.
And some topics are just they're just difficult to teach,
Yeah.
and everybody hasn't learned how to teach them, very effectively.
Hmm.
And a lot of people they
Well, what do you
they teach.
what do you think? That's what I was going to ask you. Well, what do you think? I guess a not so good method of teaching math to our children, especially like compared to what you're doing.
Oh, well, so it depends. So algorithmic. So there's two main ways. I see like two strands
Hmm.
of teaching math. There's what a lot of parents complain about now when they say new math,
Yeah, I
or
hear that. Yeah. Hmm.
they're referring to the Common Core math. Now, Common Core math, I'm a fan of it, but it's got to be done properly. If it's not done properly, then it's not
Hmm.
going to help. It's not going to help the children. But it's very conceptual,
Hmm.
and it enables you to understand the concept behind the division and the multiplication. So that's why you'll hear a lot of parents making a complaint. Well, why can't we just do it this way and just get the answer? Like we should only be focused on the answer. That's problematic because you're not actually learning how the math works, how the numbers relate to each
Hmm.
other, and learning how the numbers relate to each other. What you'll be able to do is discover other ways to solve problems.
Hmm.
So back in my day, back in our day, we probably both learned math the same way. It was very algorithmic. Just give them one way to multiply, one way
Hmm.
to divide, one way to add, one way to subtract. Let's not spend too much time talking about why we're doing that
Right.
or it works.
Right.
Let's just have them
Right.
memorize steps, and then get the answer. Which I would argue that in terms of neo-colonial education, that's very consistent, right? It's very consistent with oppressive tactics, right? Because if you just tell me, like, because it's kind of like, all right, I need you to do this job. You got one job. I need you to do this. It's preparing you for this lifestyle, right? You got one job. Just do this job. Don't ask no questions. Don't ask about how it works. Like, okay, you might be on an assembly line. Don't worry about what's happening at the beginning of the assembly line. Don't worry about what's happening at the end. You only worry about what's happening when it comes to you, and you got to do something. You got to pick that widget up and do something to it, and put a screw on it, and then you put it back down. Don't worry about nothing else. So you're not able to see the whole story. Because you're not able to see the whole story, you can't compete. You'll never be able to go on and say, I'm about to start my own company, and we're gonna make widgets, and we're gonna make them in a more efficient way because I know how they doing it, right? So with the math, like not understanding conceptually why long division even worked in the first place, why it works, or learning other methods of division, like what people call the box. Well, I call it the Henry Box Brown method because the popular term for it is the box method. So I think box. Oh, I know the story of Henry Box Brown. So let's call it that, right? To like evoke him and whatnot, and then connect to the story. Um, so if that's going on, then then you're learning about the place value that's involved. You're learning about what's really happening, or partial quotients. That's another form of math. That's like another form of division. That's like seen as new math, right? But even like I tell people, like it's new math is a misnomer, but I don't fight that fight no more because I'm like, I get it. Okay, it might be new to you. If it's new to you, cool. I dig it. But what I do in like some of my presentations is I might have a pair of Jordans on, and I might be like, okay, it's 2025 and I got these Jordans on. These are Jordan 3s. And then I ask them, I say, when these Jordans first came out? And then they might not know. I'm like, bro, the number 3 Jordans came out in 1988, bro. 88. You know what I'm saying? Like that was a long time ago, right? It was over 30 years ago, right? So the thing is, it's like, but I bought these this year, right? So this is a new pair of shoes, right? New pair of sneakers, right? But it's an old sneaker. It's just rebranded, repackaged, and like remanufactured, and they re-release it. It's not the first time they've done this. Jordan does Nike does the retros every like 5 or 6 years or whatever, right? They've been doing this. So when we think of new math, that's a parallel for that, right? It's not really new. And then when you get into like the partial quotients and the different strategies for multiplication and other arithmetic, when you start going back to like ancient Kemet and you look at like Ethiopian multiplication, right? I got some videos on my channel on Ethiopian multiplication or Kemetic multiplication or Kemetic division. you see the similarities. It's like, okay, our ancestors was doing that 10,000 years ago. But we see that as new math because we didn't learn it that way 30 years ago. So they just took something from like 10,000 years ago, brought it forward, And then also, here's another thing. I went to public schools. I'm pretty sure I have peers that went to private schools where they were learning what we call a new math now. I'm sure they was learning it differently because they had more time and they had like, maybe, more, support, more math supports in place so they could get, more exposure to different things. Cause it ultimately helps you on like standardized testing and like college entrance exams and whatnot. So, but the algorithmic way is just, we just gonna memorize these steps. It's like playing a video game, which can be cool at times, but you know, the mentality is like, okay, I just want to get the answer. I don't care about nothing else. I just want the right answer. And then I go into the next problem and get the right answer again. But often what happens is you're not even thinking about like why the answer is right. And when you're not thinking about the process, you end up not caring about the process. You're not focused on the process. So then you're not focused on the process. And then you don't really, you're not really learning. It's almost like rote memorization, which is the lowest form of education, because you're not really understanding what's really happening. Or like I said, the relationship between the numbers. Because once you understand the relationship between the numbers, then you can start to figure stuff out on your own. You can find your own shortcuts and you start to establish and recognize your own patterns and whatnot. You're muted, bro.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, my bad. Like I said, I'm going to order the book for people who are or other people who are interested in the book. What kind of things do you discuss in there?
So we talk about unit conversions. So like, all right, so this is a bottle of hand sanitizer,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So whether it's a container of anything that's got weight on it. So we got the British system, which is of measurement, the 8 fluid ounces, and then we got the metric system, 236 milliliters. So this is something that your children will be responsible for doing. Deals with ratios and proportions. They'll probably see that, hopefully no later than the 6th grade,
Hmm.
right? Definitely in the chemistry class, they're gonna have to do this. But if I know that 8 fluid ounces is equivalent to 236 milliliters, then you can ask your child the question, well, if that's true, then how many milliliters is 12 ounces?
Hmm.
How many milliliters is 20 ounces?
Hmm.
Or you could flip it and say, well, if 8 milliliters is 236 milliliters, how many milliliters is 12? No, the other way around. But my point is, we can figure out different amounts of milliliters.
Hmm.
How many milliliters it would be, or how many ounces it would be,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Or how many ounces is 500 milliliters? you know, and it's a simple equation. You set up a proportion, right? Which again, back to politics, a proportional equation, right? In order to understand proportions, we have to understand ratios.
Hmm.
The proportion is just one ratio set equal to another one.
Hmm.
But a ratio is also basically just a fraction.
Hmm.
So many children hate fractions. They're
Hmm.
uncomfortable with fractions. They're not properly learning fractions as a concept. But here's the problem with that long term. If you don't understand fractions, you won't understand ratios. If you don't understand ratios, you won't understand proportions. If you don't understand proportions, when you individually or your community
Hmm.
it finds itself in a disproportionate relationship
Hmm.
in terms of like an allocation of resources per se,
Hmm.
you won't even recognize that that's what's happening.
Right.
All because at the root you never understood fractions, and then you ended up never understanding proportions, and you probably were in a class like, I'm never going to use this in life. When we say I'm never going to use this in life, we have to understand like that's what those that are in power that want to oppress us, that's what they want us to think,
Yeah.
because they don't want us to use it in life, because if we were able to use it in life, we'd be able to challenge what they're doing more effectively.
Hmm. Hmm.
But as long as we say, man, I ain't gonna use this shit, man,
Hmm.
that's what they want you to do. Like that's not a flex. It's
Right.
like,
Right.
bro, that's what they want you to do. It's like saying, man, like it's the equivalent of saying, I don't need to know how to read. What do you know how to read for? And a lot of us, we know how to read. We're literate, but we're also illiterate because we have the ability, but we don't do it. We
Right.
don't practice. So
Right.
we still end up losing because
Right.
it's a lot of stuff that goes on. A lot of stuff that, like, we be talking about people like a lot of times, like I see a lot of doom and gloom and a lot of discomfort and a lot of people in the community, and I get it. But for me, I'm a little more calm because I'm like, I knew this was gonna happen.
Hmm.
I seen it, because we studied this. Like we know the pattern, like we
Hmm.
know the history, like we know they're gonna do this. Like
Right.
so, I would always tell kids, like, because when I would tell kids things, sometimes they'd be like, "Man, that's crazy," and I'd be like, "Bro, it's the crazy part is that it's not crazy. This is consistent. This is normal, bro.
Hmm.
This is
Hmm.
normal. When we understand like our history, we start to see like the normalcy
Right.
of what has happened and what's been happening and whatnot. So yeah, that's definitely like, something to think about.
Yeah, absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely.
So
All this math. Before we go, can you also tell the people, just what they'll what you provide,
yeah,
and what they'll be receiving once they tap in.
yeah. So definitely go to the YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is our free resource online where we provide math tutorial videos ranging from arithmetic all the way up to calculus. So basically, if your child is in school, public, charter, private, whatever, or even if you're homeschooling, if you want them, if they don't fully understand something, in the math class, they can learn it from me. Basically, that's how I put it. I'm like,
Wow,
tap in, like tap in. It's a free resource, and I mean, well, all you're spending is time and attention.
wow.
And you have the luxury to pause and rewind. It's the next best thing to tutoring. Like we do offer virtual tutoring as well. um but there's only 24 hours in a day, so we can't tutor everybody. But the next best thing is the YouTube channel, so
Hmm.
please, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You're gonna get some black history, from through the Hismatics approach. You know what I mean? If I got my Patrice Lumumba t-shirt on that day, then we're gonna talk a little bit about Lumumba and Congo, and how much of a sucker Mobutu was.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? We
Hmm.
might talk about that a little bit, and then we're gonna solve some equations. So you're gonna get both. That type of thing. There's also the book How to Use All This Math, Volume 1. It's available on Amazon, where it's a resource guide where I talked about negative ages. It's one of the chapters. Also, unit conversions, another chapter. I also have a chapter on military time, explaining how to convert, from military to standard time. Also, there's a chapter on Roman numerals.
Mm.
Speaking of Air Jordans, the Jordans are identified with Roman numerals, and when we understand Roman numerals, we understand that's like an algebra expression in itself,
Yeah.
because how to interpret Roman numerals. But I'm also very explicit in the book, in that chapter, where I talk about how it's just one language. Like it's one language. It's not a lot of people, we see Roman numerals and be like, oh, like, what I'm saying? Like, you feel like it's like it's more elite,
Hmm.
like it's superior to any African language. Like, nah, it's not. It's just one way of representing information, one form of communication. You know what
Hmm.
I'm saying? Because we got to do that. We got to do that with our people, because of how we've been conditioned,
Yeah.
within Eurocentrism. So there's that. There's fractions. How could I forget? Yeah, I got a chapter on candy fractions and pizza fractions. Now,
Hmm.
pizza fractions, and a lot. And here's another thing too. A lot of this stuff has been battle tested. Like these are methods that I've actually used with my own children.
Hmm.
So the idea is that, what do we do? What is our response when we meet a child and we find out that that child is the child of a math teacher or a mathematician? Our first reaction is, even if we don't articulate it, is that you're probably pretty good at math. And my children are pretty good at math, right? Because I've been very intentional about training them and developing them from a young age. But what I'm doing is I'm saying, like, it doesn't benefit me for my children to be good at math, but they're part of a community where most people are deficient.
Hmm.
So I'm like, I'm sharing the game basically. I'm like, I want all of us to be good at math,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I want all of us to win as a collective.
Right.
I want us to win as a collective. So the things that I've used, the methods that I've used, and this is, with another impetus for this book, the methods that I've used to, teach my own children and develop them, and then some that I'm still using with my younger children,
Hmm.
I'm sharing with the community,
Yeah.
because I want us all to win. Because that's, in order to be, a strong individual, you got to be part of a strong group. And I think that's something a lot of our people that buy into rugged individualism, I think that's the part they don't understand. They're not looking at things mathematically.
Hmm.
They don't understand that part about the value of being more communal and communally minded, right? They want to just be an individual, like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
want to be a part of this community. Like, I don't like white people. You know what I'm saying? It's just, or me and my family against the world. Like, bro, that's not gonna work, bro.
Mm-mm.
Like,
No,
you
no,
you gotta
no.
you gotta have you gotta be part of a community. So we gotta help the community to grow. Because that's the only way we're gonna win.
Yeah,
You know, that's the
yeah.
only way we're gonna win. So yeah, those are some of the other chapters in the book, and yeah, man, I started doing parent workshops. I wanna do more of those around the country.
Hmm.
Parent workshops where I'm just helping the parents to develop their confidence so that they can become the primary educators for their children. So, and
Yeah,
also, so when the homework comes home, they'll be able to help.
yeah.
And you don't gotta like, argue and yell at your kids like Johnny had 5 apples. Speaking of that,
Yeah.
my teaching style is, if the word problem says Johnny has 5 apples, before we start doing any mathematics, we got to talk about why he got 5 apples.
Yeah, right, right,
That's
right.
that's an exercise in critical thinking. Like, first
Yeah,
of all,
yeah, yeah,
why homeboy got 5 apples?
yeah,
What's he about to do with these apples, man?
yeah, yeah.
What's he about to, bake a pie? Like, what's
Hmm.
going on? He about to sell apple slices at lunchtime? Like,
Hmm.
because I mean,
Hmm.
that's it. Like, for the child that asks that question in class, oftentimes that child may be reprimanded,
Hmm.
but I don't think he or she should be, because they're thinking.
Yes.
That's critical thinking, because you want to know, like, well, what do you got 5 apples for?
Right,
I
right,
never I never had 5 apples.
right,
I might have one apple.
right.
Why homeboy got 5 apples? Like,
Hmm.
again, that's mathematical thinking.
Hmm.
Because first thinking about why.
Hmm.
Because the question why is so prohibited. And again, it serves to maintain the status quo. If you remember, I remember back in the day, um, Budweiser had this ad campaign. Why ask why?
Yeah, I remember. I
Yeah.
remember. Yeah.
And I remember thinking about the okay, so they don't want you to they're discouraging people from asking why.
Hmm.
Because when you start to ask why, now you might figure something out. You might figure out what somebody's doing that they shouldn't, that's going to harm you.
Hmm.
But as long as you're not asking why, then the status quo is maintained.
Right.
And a lot of times it's to your detriment.
Yeah.
So
I think a
so
brother
yeah,
told me that I think he was Amos Wilson or Neely Fuller. I can't remember, but he said that we don't ask questions enough. We don't ask enough
yeah,
questions, and we have to again, like you said, that is a sign of critical thinking, and but the way you but the way you have incorporated all of this within learning mathematics, again, I just have to say is brilliant. And I'm going to incorporate this in my own, uh, efforts to become much more of a mathematical thinker. Because again, when I was in school, it my interests were in other, it were writing, language arts, that kind of thing.
yeah,
Um, but it's something that I've always wanted to do, and I think let this, for the people that are watching, I don't want you guys just to think that, hey, this is just for the youth. Um, you're never too old to learn math, and it will be, and there was always a benefit to understanding and knowing more, especially training your mind to think mathematically. And so I don't want to I don't want people just to think, okay, I'm going to, you know, you know, get my kids interested. That you do it too and show them, and y'all do it
yeah.
together.
Yeah, that's good parenting.
Hmm.
That's good. You're going to show them that there's value in it.
Yeah,
And you instill
absolutely.
the value in it. Like, when I've taught adult learners, the first night of class in these programs that I've worked in, I always ask them, like, well, what's your motivation? Because
Mhm.
you got to have a motivation. Because when it gets difficult, you're gonna want to quit.
Yeah.
You know. So a lot of them would say, well, I want to prove something to myself, or I want to like set an example for my children. I'm like, that's cool, but I would always tell them, like, okay, so this might be a algebra 2 class, right?
Hmm.
And I'm like, what if your son or daughter was in 11th grade right now and they taking algebra 2 also? How decent would that be, that you can come home and help them with their homework,
All
help
right.
them with algebra 2 homework? Most parents don't do that, because a lot of parents reach what I call a homework help ceiling.
Hmm.
for a lot of people, that ceiling is kind of, it might be elementary school,
Yeah,
maybe middle school.
right.
Like, but I envision, and this is why I create the resources that I do. I envision a community where, this is one of my many ambitious goals. We can help our children with their homework as long as they live under our roof.
Absolutely.
Meaning 12th grade,
Hmm.
your son or daughter in 12th grade, they taking calculus, AP calculus. Let's get to it. We're gonna sit down at this kitchen table, do some AP calculus. We're
Hmm.
gonna find some derivatives, do some integration. Let's get it. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? Like, but we got it. But people like myself have to create the resources
Hmm.
to make it available so the parents can learn it, the grandparents, uncles, aunties, whoever. Remember earlier when I said I lost my train of thought?
Yes.
It came back to me. So
Nice.
another reason for Hismatics is
Hmm.
I'm trying to bring mathematics on par with a lot of the other areas like psychology, like because we got African centered psychologists, we got the African centered historians, but it's like as I've been, in the communities or in the community, I'm learning, I'm studying. I've been, in ASCAC, been part of study groups and whatnot. I was in the AAPRP at one point, and it's like, okay, we got this, we got that, but then it's like, okay, when it's time to learn math, we still got to go to the white man.
Right, right, right.
So it's like, so that's another motivation. It's like, like we don't need to do that. Like we got to figure out a way. And there are a lot of us that teach math. We just got to become more of a cohesive unit. You know what I'm saying? Another reason for Hismatics is I was talking to a brother. If you're familiar, I don't know if you're familiar with the II Institute based in Atlanta. It's an
No.
online school.
Mm-mm.
It's headed by this couple, Baba Wakesa,
Hmm.
Mazi Moyo, and his wife, Ife. Is her name Ife? That might be not be her first name. But Mazi Moyo. And one day I was talking to the brother, like this is probably back in 2017, 2018. And we was just chopping it up, just building on the phone. And he was like, because I was talking to him about coming, to the online school and teaching a math course. And he was like, brother, we got to take math back.
Hmm.
And when he said that to me, it was so simple but so profound to me at the same time because again, being in ASCAC study groups, studying intellectual warfare, where Jacob Carruthers references Jope going to UNESCO in 1974 and showing scientific evidence that okay, nah, like Egypt is in Africa, like these were African people,
Hmm.
right? So Jope essentially has to take Egypt back. And then it made sense to me to take math back because math is one of the contributions to the world that our ancestors provided. So if we take Egypt back, then we naturally should take back everything that Egypt offered to the world.
Right.
Math being one of those things.
Hmm.
So when he said that, I was like, yeah, we do got to do that.
Mm.
It just aligned perfectly. So that's been another motivation, for Hismatics. Um, yeah, just like the desire to just take math back and just have our people just feel comfortable with it. Like I said, like run towards it instead of running away from it because we've been
Absolutely.
conditioned we've been conditioned to run away from it,
Yeah.
and you know what I'm saying, and that hurts us in terms of just everyday life, in terms of being problem solvers. And I mean,
There's an internal fear people have about
yeah,
math.
yeah, we got to stand up to that. We got to
Hmm.
stand up to that because on the other side,
Hmm.
it's a good feeling. It's like standing up to the bully.
Yeah.
But except in this situation, it's like you stand up to the bully, and then you and the bully become cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Which
Yeah,
happens
you
a
and the bully
lot.
become
Which
yeah,
well, at least it did in my day. You know what I mean?
yeah. One of my dad's best friends.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? When they was little,
Hmm.
I'm saying this guy was bullying them, and and I know him.
Hmm.
He's like my uncle. You know what
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Right.
But
Right.
that's the origin story of their friendship.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? But that's how mathematics is. Like once you learn it, you realize, oh, okay, nah, this is cool. This
Hmm.
is cool. And also we got to remember that something else that should motivate us to want to learn it is that there are entities and powers that be that do not want us to learn it. Like
Right.
it is being denied. So
Right.
that should motivate a lot of us to say,
Yeah.
"Oh, y'all trying to keep this from me?"
Hmm.
Okay, because
I
we've
love the
had to see
analogy
that.
that I love the analogy that you made earlier about keeping our enslaved ancestors from learning how to read and write.
Yeah,
And and now in today's time, how they are discouraging us to be proficient in math. I think that was a
Yeah,
powerful correlation there.
I want to start doing research on that too about like mathematical illiteracy during like chattel slavery and
Mm,
even like Jim Crow, because when we talk about sharecropping and how sharecropping was able to thrive and Europeans were able to exploit us that way, part of it it was only made possible by, well, in part by mathematical literacy.
hmm
Because if you tell me like, okay, this is how much you owe me, and then that's why I'm not paying you this season because you still owe me this much, and it's like you have to not know how to do the math to calculate how much you actually have earned and how much you should owe.
Yeah.
I'm sure there was that going on, but also, I mean, of course, they moving the goalposts, at the end of the game anyway. So there's a lot of that too. But um, it's a form of literacy, like knowing how to read and write. We think about that, right? And
hmm
that's why I do the work with creating the word problems from the text.
hmm
Knowing how to read and write. When you read something, like let's say you read a sentence with a percentage in it, if you don't understand the concept of percentages, you can't possibly interpret and comprehend what that sentence means because it has a percentage in it. Because you have to do quantitative analysis. But a lot of times, like our definitions of reading are limited to us just being able to recognize syllables and words and pronounce them. But
mm
then when we talk about critical reading, like if I say 48% of those in the transatlantic slave trade actually went to Brazil.
hmm
You don't know what 48% means, then that sentence means nothing to you.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, so the mathematics is in line with the English language literacy.
hmm
It's part of it. They go hand in hand. So
One
so
thing
yeah,
that you
we gotta.
mentioned that it just made me think of about as far as research of math literacy and during chattel slavery and Jim Crow, it made me think about the story also of Fannie Lou Hamer and whenever she was sharecropping in Mississippi, how she saw that records weren't being kept properly on purpose to avoid paying what was owed, and she began to keep the records and keep time and I think you know I have maybe read two or three books on Fannie Lou Hamer, and that story has always come up. But until speaking with you today, I didn't view it in the proper context of her using, um, even with the lack of formal education she had her using math skills to make sure that she could limit, other black folks getting ripped off that were sharecropping for whoever they were. What was his name? I forgot his name, but that's just I don't know. I'm really starting to see the vision and what you tying math literacy into and tying how to understand certain math concepts with incorporating our history is it just makes perfect sense, man.
Yeah, because we got to be able to do that quantitative analysis.
hmm No doubt,
That's
no
that's key. That's so very key.
all this math, man. Everybody make sure y'all check brother Akil Parker out. Um again, this is brilliant work. All the links are in the description. I appreciate you for coming through, fam.
Appreciate you for having me, bro. Really enjoyed this conversation, man. I
Me
mean,
too. I would like to
I
do
like to.
we got to do it again.
Yeah, man. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I like talking about math, with anybody. But this was a very fruitful conversation. You know.
Indeed. Indeed, man. Well, you have a great day, brother.
You too, bro.
Peace.